Dragon Age Dreadwolf has leaked, and, well, the internet has been absolutely very loud about it. For a few different reasons. I think it's a situation where this is a game people are really, I don't want to say excited, but they're curious to see, because it's the first major release from BioWare since things really went quite bad, since they took some time away to actually do things right. So really there's a lot riding on this. And also, I think it is, perhaps inadvertently, perhaps on purpose, we'll have to see, but it has managed to touch on almost all of the trends in modern gaming that I think people are becoming very jaded against. And that's definitely going to be a large issue for them, which does remind me, if you would like a game that does not have those things. We do, of course, have The Pale Beyond, the game that our studio has been developing for the last few years. It comes out on the 24th of February, if you would like a Antarctic exploration-themed narrative survival role-playing game. There's a demo, it's 2 hours that you can play now over in Steam. Okay, right, Matt, Dragon Age.
The prophesied return to form for BioWare. They've learned all their lessons. They've failed so much that they can only do things right now, especially with their connection to EA and EA doing things generally better across the board there. It seems like it's their time to come back. And then Dreadwolf stuff leaked, and to be fair, it's completely out of context. There could be immense things about the game, but there's a lot of immediate criticism from people seeing and going, that's not what we want from Dragon Age, but that's some people are saying that.
Yes, people want Dungeons and Dragons, not Destiny and Dragons.
Other people on the other side going, hey, this actually might not look too bad. We kind of liked Inquisition. But I think if you ask people who very much love Dragon Age the series, which way they'd rather go, hey, do you want another Origins or do you want another Inquisition? People would say, I want another Origins. I want that old school BioWare RPG. But then you look at all the sales figures, you look at how the audience and how the market responded to Inquisition, and you go, yeah, a little bit more of that. But around the same time that Hogwarts Legacy is being absolutely nuked in the public opinion, even though it's reviewed fairly well today, a lot of the opinion is, oh, that just looks like AAA combat-y sludge from like bits that have leaked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a lot of people going, oh, why is every game the same? And this has just opened a really bad place for Dragon Age to leak, because everyone looks at the footage, especially the inventory screen, and goes, oh my god, this is just another AAA sludge RPG.
Yeah,
at least according to the leaks, or according to what people see.
Convergent design trends, and then what happens is, right, like a lot of that UI design, a lot of that design language, people will then associate that obviously with the game that it's in. So if you decide to use those things in your game, your UI is communicating an entire laundry list of like checkboxes that people may or may not like. And it's kind of weird with like Dragon Age as a franchise, so that people are caught up. I think that Inquisition is almost a bit like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where a lot of people really do like it, but also there's an amount of people that kind of turn their nose up at it. Part of that's because it started off with the famous Hinterlands, which was very long. It was one of those worst foot forward games, but there actually was quite a lot of really good stuff within Inquisition. But it was still a troubled game. It is an absolute miracle that it came out as good as it did. It suffered humongously from development in Frostbite 3. Also, it was a BioWare Magic game, which, you know, BioWare Magic, really, the last time that it would pay off would be this game. After this game, it very much stopped paying off. It then had a massive amount of post-launch support. Then the overall franchise has had more, right? Books, comic books, TTRPG, Dragon Age Absolution, the Dragon Age animated series over on Netflix. And that takes us then to 2019. And 2019 has got to be taken in context. It's around when we start this channel, which means it is Mass Effect Andromeda's time. Right? It is kind of, you know, it's or is it Anthem time? It's in and around there anyway. So for BioWare, everything's going bad, right? Like truly, like catastrophically so. We then start to get leaks from Jason Schreier. This was in 2019. I remember staying up late to make our video on this. Pre-2017, it was called Joplin, right? That was the project name. I believe they like to use musicians as their project code names in BioWare. But anyway.
Anthem was Dylan, I believe.
Yeah. So optimistic production seems good in the Tevinter Imperium setting, and it would be, this is the interesting bit, focusing the player working with a team and kind of performing heists.
Sounds cool.
Sounds cool. You could certainly see some of the Origins-like stuff paying off in a heist-like setting. But In 2016, this team is sent to work on finishing Mass Effect Andromeda, which means that they leave Joplin for a few months. And then in 2017, Joplin is cancelled. Almost all staff are moved to try to salvage Anthem. That's it. And of course, work some of that BioWare magic with a small team who are then working on Morrison, which would be the next version of this game. Now, of course, we've got to think about the broader industry context, and that does mean that Morrison is alleged to have been a live service game. And in the business, this is what we call foreshadowing, because some things that people are worried about, I think a lot of people would say, maybe we'll trace back to this era.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that happens when you've got a game in development for about 20,000 years. Which is happening, as Schreier pointed out, mostly if a game's been made now or started now, pre-production, it'll be like, hey, this is going to be a PlayStation 6 game. This is going to be a next-gen game because it takes so long, which results in all of these hey, that's a cool idea we had in 2017. How about we kind of keep it a little bit through? It's still in the core design. People haven't replaced it, and that's where we get to some unfortunate stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, so essentially this new version would be built off the Anthem tech. And that's just because Anthem was the most recent version of BioWare using Frostbite that they could use as a basis, so it would suffer from a lot less of the bullshit, of course, that Inquisition had to suffer from. Now, sadly, staff were alleged to refer to it as Anthem with Dragons, and in response, Casey Hudson, who was, one of the minds behind Mass Effect, who'd left the studio, then came back, he didn't respond in detail, but he clarified that live meant a game designed for continued storytelling after the main story. Again, still some suspicion about that. But there was a lot of chaos at this time. Creative director Mike Laidlaw left the company. And then in 2018, we saw this, of course, at the Game Awards, which was mostly just there to, essentially just to set some tone for people, right? Then at EA Play in 2020, 2 more years, we do get a tone teaser. But then Mark Dara and Casey Hudson leave BioWare in 2020. 2020, which is, not really seem to be the best thing. Now, 2021 then happens. After Anthem Next, which was basically a internal plan to see if they could pull a No Man's Sky in Anthem, they realize, nope, they can't. And that is when Jason Schreier reports that multiplayer has been stripped out of this Dragon Age game. And this is something I think that quite a few of us are really seeing in a sort of a hopeful way. Of course, this was after the success of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is brilliant, and apparently after some senior leadership staff at BioWare argued to remove those multiplayer elements. Yeah. I think it's one of those things. How many people at BioWare are just sitting there trying to push back to actually get the game that they know their studio is set up to make, only to have EA say, no, live service, everything must be live service, because we're still firmly in that pre-EA actually waking up and realizing how to do a video game again.
Yeah, this was in the era of EA going, hey, Battlefront 2, this is a good idea. Hey, Anthem, this is a good idea. And then obviously, they learn from their mistakes now, but I guess the problem is how much of that will have actually affected this project. As you see this it's been through the worst of EA, but also it's now going to release whenever you compare to what EA are doing with the likes of Jedi Survivor and going, oh, this looks really cool. This looks like, dare I say it, a video game that we might want to play. And you kind of go, well, interesting that projects last that long.
Yeah.
But we're getting there.
I mean, for the studio, people have got to remember how quickly EA forced Mass Effect 3 out. That's the kind of studio interference we were dealing with. And that was Mass Effect 3, that of course was a live multiplayer game, which reportedly had a pretty shocking conversion rate for those loot crates that you could purchase out of buffs and things. But anyway, what happens then is Christian Daly leaves BioWare. This is February 2022, so these are not feeling great to people. But then in June 2022, we hear the name Dreadwolf. It's confirmed to primarily be about Solus, who is the Inquisition character that was given a lot more story prominence in Inquisition and the Trespasser DLC. Then October 2022, the general manager, Gary McKay, confirms that it is past the alpha milestone, and that will mean basically you can play from start to finish. Now, not every feature may be perfect, certainly bugs, etc., but you now really know what you're dealing with when you've actually hit alpha. And then per that statement, the game could now be worked on with the Community Council, which is a thing that EA have been doing that people actually do speak pretty highly of. Most recently, most recently with the Dead Space remake, so that all went pretty good, and that meant they could get feedback from their players. Then, very recently, we have December 2022, where we see an in-game cinematic with the same art style that we had previously seen. So, that now is you up to speed. I hope at least, like, if you're just coming here because you heard about the leak, you now, like, understand a lot of the context, the development history, which I think really does inform the real meat of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, there's so much writing on this game for BioWare. There's so much writing on it for, I think, a lot of people who, I guess, have some faith left in EA to go, listen, are you capable of making a good game? Or, well, I suppose with Dead Space out, you can't say are Respawn and their work a fluke continually, because they could do it with motive, but now you go, well, does the time frame of Dragon Age development work for, say, Dead Space being so high quality? Are we going to have a Dragon Age of a Dead Space quality? Or are we going to have a Dragon Age that is the last vestiges of old EA and BioWare under that, I guess that out-of-date boot that EA were pressing on them? And then this leak comes out and everyone's kind of going, at first glance, at a look, it looks a little bit more like the latter, a little bit like the old EA, but
we'll see.
Get into it, yeah.
So there are two leaks. Leak number one, that is Insider Gaming, right? So their sources allege that the game is not likely to come out in this calendar year because it's right now dealing with missing features, missing character lines, so I guess there's VO and narrative to do, which is maybe a bit concerning. And also the game is pivoting away from those multiplayer elements in 2021, which has led to visible seams. Some of the multiplayer components are still sensed to some degree in the current build of the game, with one source saying the game felt a bit like Destiny with a central hub where players could probably regroup before heading out into the next mission. Now, the funny thing there is, how do we, I think it's Noel Fielding is one of the comedians I've been enjoying the work of, and it's all of that, like, humans being persuaded and the way that we receive information based on context, right?
Yep.
So it's worth pointing out that you could kind of say that about Skyhold in Dragon Age Inquisition, or maybe the camp in Origins. Now, the thing is, as soon as you add in that bit of Destiny, you're then in this kind of like lost, strange place.
Yeah, it sort of goes, okay, so this isn't a tavern and a camp for the party to regroup after and like have conversations and have a little bits of content and have things like that. Almost like, because I've been playing Hi-Fi Rush, like the little lounge between missions. It's like, oh yeah, this is a nice little break. It could feel like that in a game that would be perceived as good. However, when you bring the Destiny comparison in, people immediately go, oh, it's going to be you could imagine like the entire gameplay loop. You could imagine, especially if you're like Destiny, go, oh, well, so how do I go start a mission? Oh, I go to a menu and then I click the menu and it sends me the mission, as opposed to being in a way that's like, I guess, a little bit more narratively cohesive, like I suppose the Origins example of going to the map and doing things, where that felt right. But because it's like, oh, this is a gameplay menu now, is how people perceive these a lot more. Then you go, oh, well, how can this thing be you could describe it one way, and it could ultimately be two things. One that we look at and go, that is good, that is soulful, that is what we want. And the other version is, this is a soulless live service nightmare, just going to try and squeeze money out of people. And the description doesn't tell you which one it is. You have to actually get your hands on there.
The thing is,
context.
If it's single player, it can't be that soulless multiplayer live service instance-based thing. But if they're having to change it from that into the big single player game, I guess that's what they're saying about the seams. And I suppose when you actually look into these sources, saying that the core gameplay is, gathering a party, upgrading equipment, and completing missions, and that will not change. Now, this means, I believe, change from the older incarnation of the game that did have the multiplayer into the current one. I think people would be quite disappointed if you had a central hub and then basically just random, whatever side content to just go and do to grind up gear and XP, with maybe just some, linear stories that you can like follow for the main campaign.
Yeah, because I mean, even looking at that, gathering a party, upgrade equipment, complete missions, you could say that about Anthem, you could say that about Marvel's Avengers, but you could also say that about any RPG in history where you've got a home base, and you go, it really, I think we're coming to the point where describing video games is actually very hard, and without context you end up going, well, this could be great or anything. But even when we move on here, there's a line here that
So, of course, you are a massive, massive fan of what this studio makes. The combat allegedly is a bit more hack and slash, where there's a combat wheel that is similar to the one of Final Fantasy 15, a game that's remembered very well.
A game that has the most style over substance combat that I can't believe it shipped with. This is the problem where you come to, I guess, it's like the elevator pitch idea of, oh, it's kind of like this, it's kind of like this. Obviously, you say a picture paints 1,000 words, but like a noun, you go, oh, F15, oh, that is all these things attached to it, all these like neural links explode, your brain like bursts into this pattern of just,
yeah, suddenly you're thinking about a rushed ending and Final Fantasy 13 verses, and it's all confusing.
Yeah, but when you think of combat, you think, oh, well, that feels a little bit unfinished, it feels a little bit, oh, yeah, this wasn't really combat designed all that closely and all that tightly as you'd expect. Oh dear. But it could also just mean it was kind of flashy and the input button is kind of the same. Because you even look at FF16, you go, well, you could probably like compare 16 to 15 in terms of how the buttons work and how it looks like they work in screenshots. But then you play them and one is designed and the other's not. And you go, oh, we're running into that wall of until someone actually plays this. And especially because we have no opinion from the leaks, we just have descriptors. And then with leaked footage, you kind of go, well, we don't know how it feels to play. Like, oh dear, this is, oh boy.
Well, the final thing with Leak 1 is that you do not control your companions. Instead, you just select the ability they can cast in combat, which obviously, if you liked Origins, will be disappointing.
Yep.
Leak number 2. Leak number 2 is the one that's really caught on because visuals catch on more on the internet. So, in response to this leak, a Redditor, Revincisto, posted 20 seconds of footage, a few screen grabs, and some descriptions. And certainly it's an elaboration that confirms a lot of the negative connotations that one will have got from the Insider Gaming report. This was posted on the Dragon Age subreddit. They said that it was in early alpha and the playtester was shortly moved to another project after this. Apparently, it's a early 2022 video. And, you know, that is a fairly important thing to say.
Definitely.
A game like this, let's just say, you know, if it's not going to come out in 2023, as Insider Gaming are suggesting, then it comes out in 2024. So if you're going to be looking at, let's just say, a late Q2 2024 game, and this footage that we've got is early 2022, it could change quite a lot.
It could be like nigh unrecognizable. I think there was a tweet, I should have fired it here, but there was someone saying like they have personally seen games, they've like seen leaked footage a year out or like 6 months out, and the leaked footage is just incomparable to the final version because of a combination of, like, say that, you know, that's early 2022, that's likely not what the devs have in store. That's the version that was ready for playtesting, and it's likely even like there's builds even ahead of that. So you're looking at maybe an additional 2 full years of work, which you think 2 full years of work in the grand scheme of like a 5, or in the grand scheme of, I guess this game's been worked on since 2016, 2017. But, you know, that's how much of that's been replaced, how much of that's been thrown out. Because you can make a game this size beginning to end in like 4 years. So that's half again. So if they looked at all the feedback coming out of EA overall and the community council updated things, then this leaked footage, which, you know, it's probably looks substantially better in every meaningful way. It's just how much of that matters to people who are actually watching.
So to go through the core claims of the Reddit thread.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Combat then. Combat is completely real-time, hack and slash, high reference point of God of War 2018, which I think a lot of people can see. The player's got a regular combo attack and then their abilities, as well as a special bar that will generate as you fight that will let you do a special move, and it's like pretty much the standard Dragon Age ability wheel. Maybe the FF15 thing is just what somebody thought it looked like, but also seemingly fits Dragon Age. No party control demonstrated, so I think that is all corroborated. Okay. Then, the animation quality has drastically improved. Like for any other AAA title, it's probably not that big a deal, but we've never seen animation quality this good in any BioWare game. I didn't actually play it, but I can tell it probably feels really good to control your character. No more stiff animations, it's all very fluid and seems also very responsive. Now, that is good news, and BioWare, you know, certainly in the animation front, we can think about the many different ways that Commander Shepard has ran, or, you know, melee combat animations. It's not been their strength. So those things generally seem decent enough. I think it's just that thing, though. If you take, like, the Inquisition model, but you make things feel a bit faster, bit more responsive, improve the animations, you'll get closer to a bunch of other games that people would think of anyway.
Yeah, I think this is something that, especially the Hogwarts Legacy debates kind of gotten this up over like what action RPGs are like, and how it's very hard to tell an action RPG is bad until you get your hands on it.
Yeah.
And there's also ways, like it could be extremely good. It's like playing, for the God of War comparison is interesting because I've been playing a little bit of Evil West recently, which is Flying Wild Hog. If you know them, you know them. They make some interesting games. Not always great, but interesting. And they basically went, hey, we'll take a stab at making God of War. And you can tell the difference in combat. And you go, okay, well, God of War is a better put together game overall, but Evil West is a game with a little bit more of a character action influence. So it feels a little bit better to play in the kind of responsiveness, but it like doesn't feel as weighty, doesn't feel as like narratively solid as God of War does. So you imagine, okay, well, if you compare Dragon Age as a good BioWare attempt from this new EA of making an action game, and it works, you go, that sounds, I don't want to say it sounds groundbreaking, but it sounds like a very good way to put your modern RPG in. But it also, like, if you look at the footage from some of the leak stuff, it does look a little bit, but again, it's early alpha. You look at it, go, that looks kind of bad. The game's not out yet. They haven't shown you what it is. So it is a very complicated situation. But I think what makes it substantially worse is the UI.
Yeah. The UI, again, it's that sort of thing. If you see something that looks similar to something else, I think a lot of people are then going to assume that there are many other similarities, including, and perhaps especially, the ones that they do not like or want in this game. And I really think that's the main thing. Like, when you actually look at the UI, it's a video game UI, right? It's like, hey, that looks like Destiny, doesn't it? And I think what's happened is just a lot of convergent design. People are generally wanting, UI elements that are simple. They want to focus more on the motion design side of things and to be a bit more minimal, right?
Yeah.
Versus the more skeuomorphic or like kind of very graphic heavy designs of the past. And I'm not saying that people want to go back to the past, but I am saying that a lot of these things are getting more similar, as well as us seeing the kind of great RPGification of lots and lots and lots of different games, which people often just sort of look at and think, oh, well, what, are you just trying to do this to turn more things into, I don't know, The Division, so that you can, do all of that bullshit?
Yeah.
Of course, the thing, though, is this is an RPG.
Yeah, it literally comes from heavy RPG origins.
Yeah.
Literally origins. If you look at the Dragon Age Origins inventory screen, if you styled that to look more like today, you'd probably go, ugh, looking at it.
Yeah.
But you look at it in context from when the game was out and go, oh yeah, that's an RPG where you put gear on and your gear is important. You go get the gear and it's important to how your party works. And you can put different gear on to have different people do different things. That's what we call an RPG in how you're supposed to play an RPG, and the designs there of what most people think of an RPG is that, oh, here's your party or your character. You customize things, you have different things. But then it gets into the modern day where people hear RPG and go, we know why you've called this an RPG. You've called this an RPG because you want to have numbers to make Monkey Brain feel happy things. That's what you've done, as opposed to the full gameplay design. It's like action RPG. How many action RPGs are better if they were just action games without the RPG element?
Yeah.
There's definitely a full video on this topic at some point soon, because it's absolutely driving me insane thinking about it. But a world with like God of War without the armor, it's like, would that game been better? And then you play Evil West and go, probably. Or I mean, obviously with Hi-Fi Rush coming out and going, oh, this is just a character action game, you go, yeah, action games are better when they're no nonsense action.
They're better,
largely.
but sometimes people like loot so that they can get ahead of a power curve. And it's this thing,
Yeah.
they maybe don't like the loot, but when they actually play, because it's kind of working on that psychological level.
Yeah.
Which I guess, yeah, that's the sort of thing. And when you go to the reactions of this, so the first place that I saw this was people absolutely savaging it on Twitter. I then saw people absolutely savage it in YouTube. When you actually go to the Dragon Age subreddit, it's not as bad as you would think.
No, I think Twitter's certainly a different place in terms of response to video games, especially in the last year or half a year. It's maybe it's like how algorithmically supported content is there compared to a little bit of the niche of a subreddit being generally one would expect a happier place with more fans, as opposed to people who are just jumping in to take pot shots for the crack.
Yeah, I think it's like taking pot shots at a broader industry trend,
Yeah.
as shown by this early alpha leaked footage of a game that won't be out until 2024.
Yeah, I think people are very much getting used to loving clowning on games. because they feel like they don't like them, so they want to. I feel, and then you go to the subreddit and they're like, game look good.
It's because people have been burnt by games for years, and certainly in the case of their most recent two releases, burnt by BioWare games.
Yep.
So it's weird. I mean, you look at Mass Effect Andromeda, that was like a good example of...
My face is tired.
Like, there's all that, but like the combat in that game is actually pretty damn fun. They made that, like, it was more responsive, more actiony. But the thing that ultimately that game sort of fell over on was its narrative.
Yeah, it was narrative.
Like, it was the core things that BioWare were known as being good for. I think that is maybe the worry here, that it could actually inherit pretty good combat because of the sort of game that it was initially intended to be. Because, like, you cannot be a Destiny shooter if you don't have Destiny quality, gunplay.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, of course, the sort of hack and slash action RPG gameplay is probably going to be quite fun. But the bit that's leaked is not really the bit that I care about. The bit that I care about is the core BioWare stuff. And if we do end up in a situation where the single player experience feels like it is inheriting from a central player hub based instanced multiplayer loot slasher. Like, if the single player experience feels like it's inheriting a lot from that, then I'm really concerned.
I'm going to be honest, I almost passed out halfway through that sentence.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's expected, right? So yes, that's why we see, this is every video game menu, because it kind of is like that. A lot of this is converging. It's like, is there much inherently wrong with it? That's almost an entire UI design discussion to have besides this. I think it's just that people associate this with Destiny. They associate this with all those like loot shooters that are coming out. And ultimately, the place where all of this shit originated, it was RPGs and MMORPGs and that kind of thing, where you'd get a sword that did more DPS.
And it felt good.
Yeah, and that was that was a part of Dragon Age. Mm-hmm. So it's weird. It's like the RPGification of everything happened, and I suppose that's damaged the RPG.
It's literally like it is circled back to Poison RPGs. You could argue it's kind of weird because Dragon Age obviously started RPG and then became more actiony as tastes felt a little bit more action RPG. And now people are going, I would like to be an RPG again. And they're like, here's RPG elements. Everyone going, not like that. You're like, what did you want then? And it's very hard to get an answer to that because they want a game that's good. But the game's in alpha and people are kind of speculating loosely on leaked footage that's very, very much like nowhere close to finished in any UI sense. And I think it's just people using this as a scapegoat to talk about how displeased they are with modern trends. And I think that happens with every game because Forspoken was, obviously I'm not a big fan of Forspoken. However, it was definitely victimized by being like people, putting it on a pedestal to knock it down for what it was, even though there's like a lot of the concerns were valid, definitely, but there was a lot that were unfounded and unfair. Same with a little bit of the Hogwarts Legacy early footage being like, this is just standard AAA action RPG, just dodge roll. Wow, why are you in Hogwarts dodge rolling? Yeah, the wizards are known for dodging and rolling out of the way and like doing 1 HP damage with a spell 1,000 times against
that's
an
the
ogre.
Weird thing. I saw people talking about like with Hogwarts Legacy, it had all those like really cool, flavorful, fantastical things. And then you just like go and kill 5 bandits. And it's like, what? And I guess, yes, okay, I think in this case they were poachers, as PC Gamer were talking about. But yes, the Hogwarts bit goes away when you are going to a camp to murder people.
Yeah, which is just...
kill people, whatever.
Yeah, you need normal gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
Which you could spin into a conversation about why violence is always the default in video games. I think people can understand that. But even then, there's a video on Twitter just literally linked to me there. Here's Hogwarts Legacy combat, but here's it in some more context. Here's not the one clip everyone was laughing about. Here's a clip that's a little bit better and shows off the combat a little bit more.
They have a whole system of duels.
Yeah, same with like a late game Forspoken. We go, the spectacle in the late game is fantastic. The early game, you don't have melee, so you're just running around shooting rocks. It's terrible. I think people show the worst part of video games online, either through leaks or
Well, in the case of
to get it going.
Forspoken, like that was straight up worst foot forward.
Yeah, and that's the thing where I think people get very used to showing that off. Where I think to use a positive example of that for a game that actually is good, you imagine playing like a Devil May Cry before you've unlocked any abilities and you've got like one combo, or like Hi-Fi Rush before you know that there's a parry in the game. You go, well, this is a bit weird and interesting, but it's kind of easy. I think there's a whole modern trend of people getting angry at video games, and because they're angry about video games in general, and in most degree they're rightly to that, and then people just kind of don't give a game the full benefit of the doubt. But why would you?
Yeah.
Why would you today when you've been burned so many times?
Because that's the thing. Like,
but then it poisons yourself and you don't even enjoy games when you play them.
So let's look at the UI example. Yep. I mean, so here's some origins, right? And it's like, yeah,
soul.
it has some soul. It's
what does that even mean? How does this? Is it literally just that
it's just older?
Yeah, it's just old.
It's older with older design principles. We then move to Dragon Age 2. Not a great game. And what do we see? Oh, I mean,
more squares and less rounded edges.
Yeah, we just see the slow modernization of things like this. Mm-hmm. And then we move to Inquisition, and we see the continuing modernization and sort of, minimizing of those design elements.
Everything is smaller. We now have a clean and readable font for accessibility reasons instead of something you can't read at all at any distance. I go, well, you can see why these are there, but the impact they have on how people look at this UI is just, how is this different to God of War? As an example, that may be a positive connection because God of War is a good game, but you still look and go, oh yeah, there's clean cut fonts and clean cut everything. Oh dear.
Yeah, and you mentioned accessibility. Not only are words like God of War and Destiny great for SEO, but they're also good for the accessibility for potential readers who will be like, oh, Destiny, I know that, I have feelings about that, I'm going to click this article about the new game. So for all the people writing articles and stuff, mix in God of War and Destiny, and bam, right? You'll have all of that. That'll conjure up the way that people are talking about the Destiny games, which then will obviously conjure up the earlier leaks about this game where it, was totally supposed to be Destiny and Dragons, but now it's not that. But can they even manage to pivot the game away from that? Because that initial leak from Insider Gaming did say that, like, the seams are still showing. It's weird. Like, ultimately, all we really know about this game is a slice of its combat loop and how they're changing it. Mm-hmm. And for me, the combat thing looked fine. How they're changing it is in the direction that I want, but this has done nothing to make me more confident in the game because it's not addressing the parts that I care about. Yeah. Because it's a leak.
Yep. And then in footage is that early, you go, well,
it's a leak of a combat playtest.
Does it really? Is this representative at all? It's very hard to say. Obviously, you go, well, maybe it'd be less a problem if they actually marketed the game, but then it's kind of up to them if they want to or not. And you get into this whole thing of like, are leaks good for video games? Are they bad for video games? Has this actually primed loads of people to be really pissed off about a game that might otherwise be fine? Maybe. Is it also people saying, oh, be careful, don't get hyped for this game because it's not coming along very well? That might also be true.
Yeah.
I'll end up in this real, I guess, interesting situation where, like, here's Dragon Age leaks, everyone's super interested and super, like, everyone has an opinion, everyone wants, like, their pound of flesh out of what this emblematic video game of all the current societal video game ills are. It's BioWare. They're the ones who went from incredible RPG to less incredible RPG to Anthem. Everyone's going, oh, these are like the villains almost.
Yeah.
But then there's people who want to have that comeback story as well, and it ends up being people over narrativizing what is otherwise just a video game, an important video game to a lot of people, but still, like, it's the narrativization online that becomes so much more important than anything else.
In many ways, the narrativization does make sense.
Yeah, of course it does.
You have EA in their younger years, BioWare just making good games. Then Mass Effect 2 is a massive hit. So they get them to crunch out Mass Effect 3 in 18 months. And I think you kind of clearly know that the recurring revenue from that was maybe the thing that EA really cared about, given that they set them up for failure with the development pipeline that game has. Dragon Age, it moves from its CRPG origins And with every successive entry, it does indeed become more action-oriented. Less, hardcore, one could almost say. And as they did that with this series, it did keep on getting more and more and more successful. But then, the live service days come. EA tries to live service everything. They try to, this happens here. And now the narrative kind of continues with an EA that's maybe realizing that we can't live service everything. There's probably not enough hours in the day for our people, and we end up making bets that are so large, expensive, and low probability of success that it's just not been working out. We keep on making these humongous projects that fall in their face. How about we learn from Respawn? But the problem is, I think Respawn were always, from what we understand, insulated from that EA stuff. Vince Zampella is on EA's board. He actually does have a lot of power at EA, so he was able to protect his company, Respawn, from those worst things, whereas this is a situation of a very beleaguered studio that had really large studio health issues in terms of like employee retention, work conditions, that kind of thing. That is, it's not being led by Respawn, right? I get the sense it's more, it's changing as EA has changed, with them following Respawn's lead after seeing good results, which I think means that there are still challenges for this game to overcome, because ultimately it is being pivoted from a multiplayer live service into a BioWare game that people who loved Inquisition are supposedly going to like.
Yeah.
That's hard.
And that's the frustrating thing about the leaks being from when they are. They don't show if this game is pre-EA's, I guess revival makes sense, or them kind of coming to terms with what they probably should do. Is this a pre-death of live service video game? Or is this a post-death of live service video game? Instead of death of live service, I should maybe call it like the live service cataclysm or apocalypse, because we'll have a video on that very soon. Don't worry. We've seen them all collapse at the same time, and we are secretly kind of rejoicing as well. Secretly? No, we're outwardly rejoicing, like most people are. Everyone's happy to see this.
I feel bad for the developers, of course,
yeah,
but
definitely.
It is obviously a really oversaturated market, and we are glad to see that it's not making as much sense.
Yeah, so the market, the publishers are finally self-correcting after like 15 years of us telling them what they're doing wrong. They just didn't listen to the people who actually engage in the market at all.
I mean, hey, they see FIFA Ultimate Team money.
Yeah.
And they just know, like, hang on, look at the percentage of our entire company's revenue that FIFA Ultimate Team is. Yeah. If we could just get half this success in a core franchise, it would be massive.
Yeah. So I think
and in that pursuit, they damaged all of their core franchises.
Yep.
Well done.
Fantastic. GG. I think the thing to take away then is if by Insider Gaming's reporting this isn't going to be a 2023 game, and it's closer to 2024. And if you wonder why it might be taking that long, if you want to leave this video with some hope for Dragon Age, if you like the franchise, or some hope for video games in general, as we've been trying to espouse quite a lot of, because there's damn good reason to be hopeful, it might just be because they're looking going, our community council that we've spoken to, theoretically the same community council, or the concept of the community council has been given a lot of credit for why Dead Space was such a good remake, because they had people who cared about the franchise on call to go, don't do that, don't do that, do that, don't do that. At least as far as we're aware, we haven't obviously seen how that communication's worked. But that's like where the narrative is that. So if they can do the same for Dragon Age Dreadwolf, it might be, I guess, in the same way that God of War was kind of, hey, here's a game, obviously it's more actiony from its roots, but if they can go, hey, here's Inquisition, but we've learned lessons from Respawn, we've learned lessons from all the failures we've had, it's time to finally make something good. That could be why it's going to take a while.
I believe that it still will be compromised because all of this has happened. Yeah. The one game where I think maybe the most hope could be taken for is the next Mass Effect. Purely because it's just straight up further down the pipeline, and Mass Effect completely ran aground after Andromeda. The stakes are higher for Mass Effect, and the next Mass Effect game entered production after more of these lessons had been learned. So I think that will be the purest distillation of the hopeful things that we're talking about. And as for this Dragon Age game, as for Dreadwolf, it's just going to be a testament to whatever those developers are able to achieve from now probably till 2024. So that's it. I guess maybe not the most like hot spicy video about the leaks, but I think they do need to be put in context. Certainly now I hope you actually understand the definitely uphill struggle that these devs are going to have to fight against to get this game out the door. Speaking of games coming out the door, of course, our video game, The Pale Beyond, is coming out on the 24th of February. You can check it out on Steam if you want, and I suppose if you like BioWare games, as I do, then maybe it'll be up your alley too if you want a Antarctic sort of inspired survival role-playing and narrative game. I guess, you know, if you kind of like the idea of the vibes of like a Frostpunk, but way more from like the narrative direction, yeah, check it out. It's on Steam. It'll be coming out in like 2 and a bit weeks. Okay, that's it from us. See you next time.